Okay, now let's go into a little bit the physiology of breath, because we sort of think if I take deep breaths and breathe often and faster if I'm running, and I'm going along, I'm getting as much oxygen as my body can get. Why is that completely upside down?
It is upside down, and it's so counterintuitive. It took me months to get my head around this. Even though we've known this, scientific papers were published on this 115 years ago, showing very clearly that you need a balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen to operate effectively and efficiently. And when we breathe too much, we can offload too much CO2, which actually makes it harder for us to bring oxygen throughout the body. And if you don't believe me right now, you can breathe 20 or 30 heavy breaths. You might feel some tingling in your
Yep,
fingers or some lightness in your head.
yep.
This is not from an increase of oxygen to these areas, but a decrease of circulation,
Wow.
because you need a balance of CO2 for circulation, for vasodilation. It is integral to providing blood and nutrients to our body. And for some reason, as Westerners, we just think more is better.
And
More is
everything.
always more. That is not the proper way of thinking about this when you talk about breathing. You want to breathe as closely in line with your metabolic needs as possible. Why would you? It's like being in a car. Why would you be revving the motor everywhere you're going? At a stop sign, just revving the motor. When you are over breathing, that's exactly what you're doing. You're causing a bunch of wear and tear on your heart, on your vascular system, and you're sending stress signals to your mind.
Because I've
People like,
always understood carbon dioxide as a negative thing. You know, we want to breathe it out. We want to get it out of the system. It's the end result of the, what do you call it? The electron chain and the, ATP production. And we're producing this carbon dioxide. We're going to get it out. And that's not the case, is it? It is a controller of the acidity in the blood. It is something that we want to train. Our chemoreceptors need to be trained in order to be able to tolerate more carbon dioxide. So let's just dive into the weeds a little bit on the actual physiology that I've just touched on there, so that we can actually get to the bottom of this carbon dioxide, mind bender, really.
mhm. So when we take breath in, it enters in through our lungs and the bronchioles to these little air sacs, the alveoli. And from there, it goes through various layers and enters into red blood cells.
Mhm.
The vast majority of oxygen enters into red blood cells. There's some free floating, but not much. So in those red blood cells, there's something like 270 million hemoglobin.
Yep.
And so then it enters into this hemoglobin. And it's funny. Why would, when we're working out, why would we get more oxygen in one area than another? So CO2 is the signaling molecule. So where oxygen is going to detach is in areas where there is CO2. So
Uh-huh.
oxygen isn't going to attach otherwise. So you need this healthy balance of CO2. We have 100 times more CO2 in our bodies than we do oxygen. Okay,
Wow.
so this is this very carefully controlled system that needs to be in balance. And our bodies are so wonderful at keeping us alive. So when we become imbalanced, all these other things happen. If we become too acidic, we'll learn to breathe more, right? We'll trigger that. If we become too alkaline, our kidneys will release bicarbonate. So all of this is incredible and so important.
Mm.
Compensation, different than health. We can
Yes.
compensate for a very long time. Imagine you can live maybe 40 years eating garbage crap food, eating Fritos. That doesn't mean you're healthy. No offense to Fritos, delicious, absolutely delicious. But it doesn't mean you're healthy. So
Yeah.
the reason why you have to understand this balance of CO2 and oxygen is because you can't just understand CO2 as a waste product. It's still considered this in medical school. Oh, it's
Yeah.
this waste product. You
Yeah.
don't need it. But
Yeah.
people who study this know that it is absolutely essential to have that balance. You don't want too much, but you don't want too little. You want your body to be able to operate at peak efficiency without having to go through all those compensations, right, to keep you there.
But it's the CO2 that's actually pushing the oxygen into the cells as well, isn't it? And that was another mind bender as well.
It's an exchange. So you can think about those red blood cells as this cruise ship, right? So, and they're full of oxygen, and they cruise to areas where there are other passengers that want to get on. This is CO2, and they
Mm-hmm.
exchange. So CO2 hops on as oxygen hops
Pops
off.
off. Yep.
And this is just how it works. So that need to breathe, you're 100% right. A lot of people think, gonna exhale, hold my breath. Oh, I don't have enough oxygen. I need to breathe. No, that is dictated by rising carbon dioxide levels. And so many of us are so sensitized to CO2 that we can't hold a breath more than 10 seconds
Yeah.
without going, but they've done a study with athletes and they found that to very comfortably hold your breath over 25 seconds, 89% of those athletes will not have any breathing dysfunction. So
Wow.
this is a great practice to do. And this is why this is used in so many different breathing techniques for so long. The ancient Chinese were doing breath holds, pranayama, ancient Hindus were doing breath holds for thousands of years, is to exhale softly and to hold your breath calmly. You don't want to be struggling and feeling your diaphragm moving, just calmly. When you feel a little teaspoon of discomfort, you breathe and you calculate how long that is. Don't
Mm-hmm.
look at this as a competition. I know that there's a lot of very
Yeah.
competitive people out here. No, you can compete later. So what you want to do is to get your CO2 tolerance higher, because by having a higher amount of CO2, which is really a normal amount of CO2, your body can operate better. You will have more circulation. Oxygen will detach more easily. And when you're doing endurance sports, this is what you want. You don't want to use energy for things you don't have to use energy for.
No.
So you want to be burning clean and tight, and that's what this allows you to do.
So this is about efficiency, isn't it? And I remember you saying that the average person is breathing 12 to 18 times a minute on average. And ideally, we should be around the 5.5 or say 6 times a minute would be ideal. So breathe light to breathe right was one of the catchphrases that stuck in my head, and that's my trigger for I'm over breathing again. And so it's actually slowing down our breathing rate and not increasing the volume so much as diaphragmatic breathing. So using the deep lower lobes of our lungs to actually get the breath in, and doing it a lot slower. And why are we all, doing it 12 to 18 times a minute and over breathing, which is, yeah, it is
And
over breathing.
sometimes a lot more than that. I
Mm,
mean, I've talked to clinicians who see people breathing 25, 30 times a minute, just,
yep.
and they've been doing this for decades and their bodies are just
Wow.
destroyed.
Wow.
So it's these things become a habit after a while, and our body gets used to that cycle of compensation, and we start acknowledging this as normal. We start
Mm,
thinking having migraines is normal, having cold toes and cold fingers all the time is normal, being exhausted all the time is normal. None of this is normal, and it's a nasal breathing now. Is I will bring on my guest. He's been waiting over here patiently. Is
beautiful.
you can see, for the people who aren't watching this, I'm holding up a cross section of a human skull. You can see the nose right here. When you breathe through the nose, you're forcing air through this labyrinth. It's
Wow.
so similar to a seashell. It's called the nasal concha. So
Ah.
seashells have their shells this way to keep invaders out, to keep pathogens out, right? Our
Ah.
noses serve the exact same function. This is our first line of defense. So when we breathe through our nose, we're heating air, which is important in cold climates. We're humidifying it, which is very important in dry climates. We're pressurizing it. We're conditioning it. We're removing particulate, which is important if you live in a city or basically anywhere else now. We're helping to fight more viruses. So there will be a
Mm,
smaller viral load breathing through the nose. And we condition this air. So by the time it enters our lungs, it is properly conditioned to be more easily absorbed. When you're breathing through your mouth, you can consider the lungs as an external organ
yeah.
because they're just exposed to everything in your
Wow.
environment. So not only that, not only is this the most effective filter we have, is it forces us to breathe more slowly. This is a self-regulating device.
Because
How
smaller
long did it
apertures. Yeah.
How long did it take me to take that breath? It took a while. How long does this take?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So that slower breath with that pressure allows us to gain 20% more oxygen breathing through our nose than equivalent breaths through our mouth.
Holy
Again,
heck.
if you think this is going to make no difference to you, you're absolutely crazy. And this is simple science. This isn't controversial stuff.
No, this is simple science, but not well known until your book came out and became a worldwide best-selling book. Thank goodness.